Michelle?
Yes,
Darn, I was hoping to do that before you started the recording. There are several people unmuted. Would you like me to go ahead and mute them so there's no background noise, or what's your preference?
I would love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, we are going to keep participants in mute just to control the background noise. Thanks for that. Again, you have access to the chat for making your own contributions. To get us started, I am going to go ahead and first of all, welcome you to the Humanizing Challenge that's brought to you by CVC-OEI and @ONE, which is an initiative in the California Community College system focused on improving online education, which is now more than ever a critical topic that is important to all of us, and of course to serving the needs of our students, especially our most vulnerable students. I'm going to share my screen just to orient you to the challenge. Everybody gets here in different ways, and so I do want to be sure that you understand this is part of a 3-day challenge. Stacy, if you could share the link to this URL in the chat, that would be great. We have 3 days. And this is day 1, and we're kicking it off with the anatomy of learning, sending cues of trust and belonging from the first click. That's what today's presentation is about. And then at 2:30, we'll be jumping into another session with Diamudra Dennehy and Gayatri Manikandan and myself, taking off our emotional armor, reflections from first-time online instructors. So if you're available to join us after this session, we invite you to do so. And then at the bottom of this page, we have self-guided activities for you to jump into on your own. We have a getting to know you survey that you can import into your course if you use Canvas from the Canvas Commons. I'm going to talk about this survey today in my presentation. And then we have some prompts here about unpacking your emotional armor. So that's something that we also hope that you'll participate in. And we have a link at the bottom that'll take you up to a Padlet, which is like a collaborative digital bulletin board that you can share a reflection on about your day from the day 1 of the 3-day Humanizing Challenge. And then tomorrow we invite you to come back again. We have a very special session at 11 a.m. Pacific with Fabiola Torres, talking about practicing radical love, breaking down instructor-to-student hierarchies. And then your activity after that day is to record, host, and caption a 2 to 3 minute imperfect welcome video. And then on Thursday, we are dedicating Thursday to the liquid syllabus, which you will also see a preview of today. We'll get deeper into the liquid syllabus on that day with a presentation at 11 a.m. Pacific. And then your self-guided activity for that day is actually to create your own liquid syllabus with Google Sites. And we have a resource that's going to walk you through that. So that's what our Humanizing Challenge looks like. I would like to acknowledge all of you for being here. I'm going to turn off my share screen because I really want to look you in the eye when I say this. I want you to know that I recognize how hard it is what you are doing right now. And I want to honor that. I want to value that. I would like to ask each of you at this moment to reflect back on your experiences since March and think of one person who has supported you in some way. That might be a friend, a family member, a colleague, maybe someone you follow on Twitter who you've never even met. But think about that person. And I'd like to invite you to click on chat and share the name of that person in the chat. If you don't want to share their full name, you can share their initials. It's up to you. And if we could just look at that chat with all of those names of all of those people that are being recognized right now, so quickly that it's hard to even read. I want to start this session with a focus on relationships and connection. And now that you have someone in mind, I want you to hold on to that feeling and really recognize and be mindful of what that feels like to have someone who you can lean on, someone who's got your back, someone who's going to give you help when you need it most. Because that's really the heart and soul of what humanizing is all about. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen again. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing those names with us. So the anatomy of learning, let me click past some of these intro slides here. If you are a Twitter user, I do want to invite you to use Twitter with the hashtag HumanizeOL to share some of your takeaways and reflections, and maybe even some resources that you have or that you learn about throughout this challenge. I will be searching that hashtag, following it over the next 3 days, and it's a great way to stay connected. And if you've never tried Twitter, and if you're game for trying another new thing, I invite you to go for it. I want to start my presentation by sharing a statement that I've written about what it means for me to be an equity-minded educator. Equity is at the heart of humanizing. It's what guides this whole conversation. For me, it requires me to make a commitment to improving my knowledge about the experiences of others, the experiences of humans who are Black, who are different from me, Latinx, Indigenous, other people of color, LGBTQIA, and physically or cognitively different. It requires me to continuously strive to see the privileges I have and continue to be afforded by the color of my skin, my cisgender, my heterosexuality, my abled body. It requires me to intentionally connect with, make space for, and learn from my diverse colleagues who I acknowledge, and continue to make changes in my teaching practices, always making changes. Share equity-minded online teaching practices that work. So as I make changes and I find something that seems like it's making a difference, I share that. That's something that I am committed to doing. And remove my emotional armor and engage in conversations about race and ethnicity that make me feel uncomfortable. As a white person, I myself have never been taught to acknowledge that I have a racial identity. And so that's a space that I am living in now. And being part of those conversations is really hard. It's a lot easier to not be part of them, but I'm making an effort to do that. And it requires me to recognize that I will make mistakes. I will say things that I shouldn't say. I will do things that come off funky. And that's a good thing. It's something that I try to remind myself of every day, because if we don't make mistakes, then it's a sign that we're not trying new things. So this is hard. This is really hard. People say to me, oh, you look so calm when you present. You know, I'm not. I'm super nervous. And I want to acknowledge that, because I know that everyone right now is in this place of vulnerability with what we're doing with COVID, with all of the pressures, the unexpected pressures that it's placed upon us. And I'm very admirable that you have made the commitment to be here today and participate. So I want to start with this slide, which is perhaps one you may have seen before, but if you haven't, I want you to see it because it's very important. We know lots of things about online courses, but one of the things that we know is that the equity gaps, the racial and ethnic equity gaps that occur in face-to-face courses are exacerbated when courses go online, okay? I don't want to put that under the carpet. I want to start with it front and center so that we can be aware of this. What you're seeing here is a horizontal line across the top, which shows the statewide average success rate for online California Community College courses. This is a few years old. It's hard to get this data, unfortunately. And only our white and Asian students are above that. And when we look at our African American, our American Indian and Alaska Native, Hispanic and Pacific Islander students, they all fall below that. Particularly that gap between our African American students and the statewide average is about 15%. So those gaps, I want you to look at those as opportunity gaps. We are going to take a different approach. We're not going to say online is bad. We're not going to say some students can't learn online, because that's what a lot of people say. I've been part of conversations that have almost in the past in my teaching experience made me feel shameful for teaching online. I loved it, but the language that has been used about online courses is problematic. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. I love this quote, and this is the mindset, this is the equity mindset that we're going to use as we move forward, thinking about that data that I just shared on the earlier slide. Online is not the problem. Lack of human connection is a barrier that exacerbates equity gaps in online courses. For me, when I started teaching, I remember where I was. I remember what room I was in when I heard about the distinction between course design and online teaching. The two are deeply intertwined, but the teaching part is something that we often don't talk about enough. And so that is going to be part of what we discuss here today, the teaching part. Once the course starts, how do we do that online? What is it? What might it look like? I'm not here to say that there's one way to teach online. Teaching is an art. Teaching is hard work, and teachers aren't supported enough. So I also want to say that. And when I share examples in this presentation, some of the work that I've done, I've been doing it for a long time. And it is my hope that it doesn't make you feel anxious or not good enough. I hear that from people too. Everybody enters this conversation at a different place. So please be mindful of that. When it comes to the anatomy of learning, let's talk a little bit about what that means. In higher education, we often really privilege cognition when it comes to learning, thinking and understanding. This is part of a value that's embedded in Western culture. It goes back to the work of Descartes from the 17th or 18th century, the period that is remembered in Western history as the Enlightenment. It's also the period of colonization. And what we know about the way humans learn, however, is that that's only part of the puzzle. The other part is feeling and sensing. And we can't separate these two because learning happens at the intersection of thinking and feeling. I have a book noted at the bottom of the slide by Laura Rendon, which I strongly recommend that you check out if you want to learn more about this idea. And what she starts to unpack more is the sense of duality that is a part of indigenous cultures that really acknowledges both of these dimensions of learning, which is often not the way we approach learning in higher education. And I'd like to start also by acknowledging a very brave and courageous student named Megan Corriere, who wrote a post for the @ONE website, which is linked below. @ONE stands for Online Network of Educators. And I'm going to read this to you. This is written by Megan about her experiences from last spring. While delivering content knowledge is important, teaching is about much more than that. It also involves addressing the social, emotional needs of students. Both professors and students can relate to experiencing varying emotions through this time. Listen to students and check in with us if you can, because we need to know our professors are there and that they care. We need to know that you are human too, and that we can come to you if the class gets too overwhelming for us to handle on our own. Megan continues, there have been many times that I have had to shut my camera off in class, have a good cry, and come back. We are living through unprecedented times, and now more than ever, it is important to have empathy, kindness, and patience. I have been seeing a lot of conversations and articles and both sides of the coin when it comes to cameras and requiring students to have cameras on. So just as I did when you joined the session today, you know, I invited you to join with your camera. We disabled it on purpose so that it wasn't on when you joined and you had the choice to turn it on. When students turn their cameras on, they're letting you into their homes. They're letting you into environments that they may not feel comfortable sharing. There's lots of reasons why you didn't turn on your camera. I bet some of you have kids screaming all around you. And that's something we also hear from our students. Some of our students don't even have homes. And that's something that can be revealed through sharing a video camera. So this is something we want to be mindful of and think about how what we do in our classes foster trust. Because trust and safety are really important more than ever this coming term. I'm not an expert in trauma, and I don't want to pretend to be. There are other people like Karen Costa, who has a resource that she just shared last night. I grabbed it off LinkedIn and I wanted to add it to this list. But trauma changes the brain. It affects the executive functioning and self-regulation skills. They're completely derailed. And when a person is experiencing trauma, they're in flight or fright mode. Did I say that right? I always say that wrong. It derails a person's ability to plan, focus, remember, and juggle tasks. I bet you can all relate to that. I picked up my phone and called myself a couple times during this pandemic. I don't know why, but that's what my brain decided to do. A traumatized brain continuously scans an environment for danger and safety cues. So when that scanning is occurring, learning can't happen. So we need to think about those cues and ask ourselves, what are the cues that we're sending in our online courses to our students? And how do we foster safety and trust online? So what is trust? I love this definition. For those of you who know me, I'm a big Brené Brown fan. And I got this definition through her video, The Anatomy of Trust, which I realize is actually how I got this title for this presentation. But this quote, trust is taking something important to you and making it vulnerable to another. When I first heard that quote, first of all, it gave me chills because I never really thought about trust in that way. But when I started applying it to teaching, it made me recognize how much we do in our courses that expects trust from our students, right? What do we do in our courses that just simply from the beginning expects them to trust us? Trust is something that has to be developed. And one of the best ways to develop trust is to actually take something vulnerable to you and share it with another person. Instructor-to-student relationships lie at the heart of humanizing. Online courses serve as the connective tissue between students, engagement, and rigor. So this bigger quote here, we're talking about starting a course with trust and safety, building instructor-to-student relationships, and then leveraging those relationships for engagement and rigor. So keep that in mind because that's basically the trajectory that we want to follow here today. It is true, folks. It is true when we teach online that our students, it's so much easier to just see our students as names on a screen. And I bet you're feeling lost at that if you've never taught a fully online course before. But it doesn't mean that you can't get to know your students. It does mean that the less we know about a person, the more we make up, and we have to be very cautious of that. There was an online study that was released last year from Stanford, scholars at Stanford, that examined online courses and found that instructors were 94% more likely to respond to discussion posts from students who they perceived as having a white male name. It was stunning. So the less we know about people, the more we make up. Our students are not underprepared. They are prepared differently. And in our courses you have, and this very much also depends on the institution that you teach at. I'm speaking to California Community College faculty. We serve the most diverse student population in the world, 2.1 million students. We have a significant number of students who are housing insecure, who are food insecure, and also are a racial or an ethnic minority. And so I want to address this idea of the dependent learner and the independent learner. There are a mix of both in your courses. And when we think about who succeeds, I want you to keep this in mind. The dependent learner is unsure about how to tackle a new task, needs scaffolding to complete tasks, will sit passively and wait if stuck until the teacher intervenes. The independent learner possesses cognitive strategies for getting unstuck, attempts new tasks without scaffolds, has learned how to retrieve information from long-term memory. When you have dependent learners who don't feel that they trust their environment and don't know there's someone out there to help them, they're not going to advance. They're not going to progress in the course. And every human starts as a dependent learner. We know from studies that education is not neutral. Classroom studies document the fact that underserved English learners, poor students, and students of color routinely receive less instruction and higher order skills development than other students. This denies students the opportunity to engage in what neuroscientists call productive struggle that actually grows our brain power. And as a result, a disproportionate number of culturally and linguistically diverse students are dependent learners. So keep that in mind when we look at those equity, the equity data that we started with. We need to know who's on the other end of the screen. We need to know the diverse stories, realities of our students, but they also need to know us. And when we share who we are, it helps them to build trust. It helps them to lean in. And you know what? It's going to make teaching your online courses so much more enjoyable. As we get to know our students, we start to recognize those mindsets. And the more we know about those mindsets, that self-doubt, stereotype threat, imposter syndrome, the more we can interpret things differently, like assignments that are submitted late. Maybe that's a student who just needs a little encouragement and a nudge. Maybe we want to reconsider giving a 0, right? Maybe we want to reconsider that late policy. So what course design features influence online community college student performance most? This is from a study from 2016. These researchers examined a variety of different course design features, and the one that stood out as having a significant impact on student grades, higher student grades, was quality instructor-to-student interactions. I want to stress here that I said the word quality. Quality, instructor-to-student interactions, not quantity. And the way that the study, based on the student data, determined or defined quality was when a student knows that there's an instructor who cares about their learning. So we're going to watch a couple of videos now. And if someone could, Helen or Stacy, keep an eye on the muting. I'm hearing a little bit of background noise. I'm sorry, I get really distracted by that. We're going to watch a couple of videos. This first one is from a student in an online course. It's very brief, but I want to have you hear what he says and think about that difference between quantity and quality instructor-to-student interactions.
I can see that a professor isn't trying to interact with the course, and it's just little things like the automatic announcements that only show up at 12 a.m. on a Sunday. Like, you know, it's all automated. They're just not, or you leave a question and ask the professor and 3 weeks later you get a response. Like, that's when I start to judge, like, I just wish you wouldn't be here. Like, I wish you would focus your energy somewhere else because I'm not learning anything. But yeah, so that's the only judgment, is when you're not doing anything. We don't care when you make mistakes though.
As you listen to Matthew's comments, you know, you can hear how he's pushing back on that environment, right? He's not motivated, he's not engaged because he feels like his instructor isn't engaged. It's not to say that we shouldn't use automated communications, and that's not what I'm saying. I think we need to lean on things to help us be organized, to be sure that communications do get out, and that's a great strategy. But when that's the only thing that a student gets from an instructor, to have them portray their presence in their learning experience, that is when we have a problem. Now I'm going to play a clip from another student, and I'm going to have to advance past the glorious Fabiola Torres here at the beginning, who you will see more of tomorrow. And I want you to hear this student speak about her experiences and contrast it with the experiences that we just heard.
I feel that when the instructor assigns or gives us a due date, I feel that we need to be cognizant of that, respectful of that, and do our very best to get it done. However, there's the juxtaposition there is that we are taking online classes because we have life outside of the classroom. So the very reason that we are taking this communicates what we expect. Things happen. So being able to have that connection with your instructor and obviously be reasonable. For me, I was traveling a lot to see my mother-in-law who wasn't well, and we were getting stuck in airports, and I carry my desk everywhere with me, my little laptop and everything. And I also suffered, I had an accident where I suffered a TBI. I got in line, and I'm going to give her a big shout out, Cynthia Wilhelson from Cuesta College. I'm having a trouble here. I'm in Florida. I can't get to the pharmacy. And she just pushed it out a few days. I was able to breathe. I was able to get my work done. I'm going to cry. And that self-confidence came back. I did well. And I was so appreciative of that function. Very often I haven't seen it in a face-to-face class. Here's the due date. You know, you show up to class, you show up to lab, and you're good to go. But this is one of the beauties of online school, is that it does happen.
So there's a lot to reflect on there. And I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot of great sharing happening in the chat. Thank you so much. I did see Lisa Lane, hi Lisa, share that, I think you said, Lisa, one of your goals is to ensure that students feel comfortable asking for an extension. And that's such an important point, because we can put it in the syllabus, right? If you need an extension, ask me. But if students don't feel trusted, if they feel like they're going to get shot down, like maybe their reason isn't good enough, should students even have to give a reason, right? Those are things that we want to ask. So how can we create this flexibility and also recognize the impact of that? What is our intention? We're trying to measure learning. If it gets turned in a little bit later, is that the end of the world? And I'm seeing lots of comments about flexibility and supporting students in the chat. So thank you for that. So the principles of humanized online teaching are presence, awareness, and empathy. Don't be a robot. It's a true story that I once had a faculty share with me, that her student said to her, "Oh my gosh, I thought all my online instructors were robots." Yeah, I still have a hard time with that one, but I don't forget it because it's really important. We have to be thinking about the cues that our students receive on their end. What does our course feel like to them? Awareness, know our students, not just names on a screen, know their rich stories. Empathy, see things through our students' eyes without casting judgment on them. That's what empathy is. It's very different from sympathy. Sorry about that. The other important part that plays into relationships is what we know about validation theory, again, from the work of Laura Rendon, going back earlier to the 1990s. Validation theory is often used in teaching environments face-to-face, and we have to apply it to online too. These are just good teaching practices, and we need to see how to make things happen online, which I am getting to. So from her work, we see students with a tremendous amount of self-doubt who move from I can't do this to hey, I've got this. And from the research, these are the things that students have cited that help them get there. When an instructor took time to learn my name, when an instructor said, you can do this and I'm gonna help you, when an instructor became a partner in my learning, when faculty encouraged students to support each other. These little things matter. They make people know, they tell our students that you see them, and they tell our students that they help our students know that they belong. Warm demander pedagogy is from culturally responsive teaching, and it's how we move a student from a dependent learner to an independent learner, going back to that idea. It starts with cultivating positive instructor to student relationships. It starts with relationships. You need the relationship to make this happen. That's what's critical. When students know there's someone on the other side of the screen who cares about them, they are going to push themselves harder. I bet you can think about your own learning and start to think about warm demanders who have challenged you. That relationship is leveraged to increase the academic performance of our students. Producing a higher level of academic work becomes a reciprocal obligation between a student and a teacher. Sorry, my Google Slides like to do that sometimes. Okay, I'm just going to go here because that's where it wanted to take me. So how do we do this online? As we get into this, it is so important for us to acknowledge this. Relationships start with psychological safety, and creating psychological safety requires us, who are teaching online, to remove our emotional armor and be vulnerable. It requires us to step out of the professor mode. It's easier to do in a classroom, right? It may feel more natural. Online, you have to be more intentional about it. You have to construct your presence, and it can feel more uncomfortable, particularly if you're using video, which is definitely a high impact strategy with humanizing. It feels super weird to talk to a webcam, just like I'm talking right now to a webcam, but I know you're out there. So picture your students and know that you're doing this for them. This is another thing that's different when you're teaching fully online courses with face-to-face teaching, right? We know when our course starts, we know the day, we know the time, and we know when that first session ends, and things are different with online. What we know is that there's a high opportunity zone when it comes to fostering trust, sending cues of trust and belonging, and it starts before the first week of a course. So if you have it in your practice, if you have the room to make this happen, this is something that we're hoping that you'll do through this Humanizing Challenge, is to develop communications that you can send to your students before a course begins. This is referred to in, that beginning of a course is referred to in the research as a period of belongingness uncertainty. So that's a barrier. How can we use our humanized communications to really take down that barrier? And one of the things that we can do is develop what we refer to as a liquid syllabus. And I should mention, I haven't said this yet, but in the California Community College system through CVC-OEI and @ONE, we have two courses. We have a course called Humanizing Online Teaching, which focuses on developing videos and why social presence is so important. And then we have an equity course. And the outcome of our equity course is developing a syllabus. And one of the options is the liquid syllabus. So I want to unpack what that is a little bit here. And I'm going to do that actually by taking you out to my liquid syllabus. This is done with Google Sites. It can be done with any web-based tool. It's public and it's mobilely responsive. So it renders beautifully on a phone. So I want you to imagine sending a link to a student via email before a course starts and having them simply be able to click on the link and have it render on their phone, and then they would play a video from you.
Hi there and welcome. I'm Michelle Pacansky-Brock, and since we're going to be spending so much time together in this class, I thought we'd get started by having me just share a little bit about myself.
The first thing I'd like to share with you is that while most of you live down in this area, I actually live way up here near Sacramento. But I am here for you when you need me. The other thing I want you to know is that I'm a teacher at heart, but I didn't always know that about myself. I started my
I'm not going to play that whole thing. You do have my slides if you want to watch the rest of it. I invite you to do that. So think about that, right? If in an email you can click a link and hey, Helen or Stacy, can you check the microphones again? I've got a lot of static in my ear. Thank you. Perfect. If a student can click a link and from the very first click, they have your warm presence, inviting, welcoming them to the course. That makes a difference, right? And why does it need to be public? Because they don't have to worry about typing in passwords and all that stuff. It's making it as accessible and available as possible. And speaking about accessibility, that is part of developing a liquid syllabus too. I want to click on the edit mode super quick and show you something that's built into using Google Sites at the top. This is my site, so I have access to edit. I'm going to click on the preview mode at the top, and it allows you to look at your site, what it's going to look like on a computer, on a tablet, and on a phone. And you can see that it looks great on a phone, right? There's a commitment to them from me. There's information about how this course works so that students can start to unpack, oh, I've got all these different courses and they're all going to be different. I've never taken an online class. What do I need to know to prepare? So think about that. Teaching philosophy, our Pact, and I'll talk a little bit more about our Pact in just a moment when I get back to the slides here. So that's what a liquid syllabus is, but it's not just about a technology. It's about rethinking that syllabus and writing it in a way that uses supportive, hopeful language, tips for success, so students know how to be successful, public, it's phone friendly, and again, it starts with your warm human presence. And it's an imperfect video, imperfect, because human is not perfect. You can also tell stories in your course. Tell stories, being vulnerable, like I started telling in that video, right? I told a little bit about how I knew that I loved teaching so much. Telling that story breeds empathy in your learners, and empathy makes connection. That's actually been proven with neuroscience. It's called neural coupling, and you can go ahead and look that up if you want to learn more about that. Telling stories is also a culturally inclusive teaching strategy. So let's talk a little bit about that Pact. Creating a learning pact it sends the cue to your students that you are a partner in their learning from the very beginning. And this is a pact I include in that liquid syllabus. I know all my students aren't going to click on that link and view it, and that's not the point. I include this also in the course when they get there. The pact lists what I expect from my students, and it lists what they can expect from me and what I will expect from them. It's clear, expectations are up front, and I'm not going to read this out loud. You can read it on your own, but I do want to point out number 8 on both lists. I asked my students, is there anything else you'd like to add to this list? And I include this in Canvas in a discussion. And I ask students to either leave a reply in which they agree to it or leave a reply in which they want to add something to either list. And then that becomes a conversation. This is my course homepage, and I want to show another way to use video.
Hi there, and welcome to our course homepage. I'm Michelle Pacansky-Brock, your instructor for this course. I'm going to take just a moment of your time to point out some important things about the homepage before you move forward, okay? I want you to take just a moment to find 2 things on the homepage: the to-do list and the calendar. Now, if you're viewing this on a computer, you're going to look over to the right side of your screen to find the to-do list. That's super helpful, and it will always show you the next couple of things that are due in the course, so it's a great way to be sure that you're staying on track. You're also going to find a view calendar link over there that'll show our due dates in calendar view. Now, if you're on the mobile app, which I strongly recommend for this course, look at the bottom of your screen and you'll find a link to the to-do list and to the calendar, and you'll get access to the same information, okay? The other important thing to know is that if you're on a computer, you'll see the 2 most recent announcements from me appear at the top of the page. If there's nothing there yet, it just means I haven't posted any yet. And if you're in the app, you need to click on announcements to access those. That's it for now. What I want you to do now is just go ahead and click on the Start Here link. That's going to take you to the first page in our orientation module. You'll use the Next button to navigate through the module, and this week you are going to complete both the orientation module and module 1. That's it for now, so let's get going and I'll see you online.
I want to point out that I recorded that with my phone, and I think you folks can see me right now as I'm speaking. I hope you can. If you can, this is the little tripod that I used. There's lots of different tricks. Someone pointed out that you can use rubber bands to tie a phone to something to hold it steady. If you have a selfie stick, that would work. Mike Wesch has a video where he shows himself using tape to tape it, like good packaging tape, to a glass door so the light comes in and illuminates his face. You're going to learn so much more about video tomorrow with Fabiola Torres, who is here. Thank you, Fabi, for being here and for contributing in the chat. There were a lot of questions about a liquid syllabus, and I do want to point out, someone said, can I use that in Blackboard? A liquid syllabus, it's a website, so it's a link. It's a link that you can include in as many different places as you want. Just about 30 minutes before we started our session, I saw this tweet from Lynn Serwin, who said, creating a schedule for your students so that they know when, why, and how is the key to successful online teaching. And she shared a graphic by Mike Wesch, who I just mentioned a moment ago. And this is the graphic that he shared. And that's an interesting idea, right? Maybe along with providing a day-by-day, like this is what to do when, a schedule for the week, or suggested when you should do this, when things are due, provide it in writing. We could also provide it in visual form. And then Ken Bauer replied and said, I really love Mike's work, but I wonder if we need to be careful to also model rest in our planning. And I thought that was a beautiful comment, and I definitely wanted to include that in this conversation so that we can be thinking about that. A Getting to Know You survey, which is one of the self-guided activities for today for the Humanizing Challenge, is a simple survey that students complete in the first week of a course. By sending this survey, by having students complete the survey as an assignment that they get points for, it gives them confidence early in the course to do something simple, and they see that they have points, so that's a bonus. It also lets them know that you care about them because you're asking about them. I have some examples of questions. We also have samples provided. There's one in the Canvas Commons, and there's instructions on how to import that into your course if you use Canvas. And I have one that is done in Google Forms, which is linked below if that's something you want to check out. But it's just a survey, so any survey tool would work for this. And some of the questions you could include are, what are your preferred pronouns, if that's not a field you have activated in the Canvas profile. I will leave you feedback in video format or voice format. That's a great high impact humanizing practice. We know that when students hear feedback, it resonates differently. It resonates differently than text. They're less likely to take it critical if they hear your voice intonation and they hear your emotion. But we want to be sure that that works for students, right? For all different kinds of reasons, students may not want that. And so you ask, does that work for you? And if it does, thumbs up, you can proceed. If a student says no, you make note of that and you use written feedback for that student. In one word, describe how you're feeling about this class. This one question will help you identify your students who need your high touch. You'll have students who say fine, you'll have students who say curious, you'll have students that say excited. At least in the past we have, I don't know what students are going to say this time around, but the students who say anxious, overwhelmed, they really are the students who need your high touch the most. So identifying your high opportunity students at the start of the course right off the bat is really a great practice. And then also please share one thing that may interfere with your success in this course. You're going to hear all kinds of things, and that's where you're going to start to understand what students are dealing with in this situation. Regularly in the past, I would have a student almost once a year, I'd get a student, you know, that says, I'm going to have my baby in the middle of the semester. So those are the kinds of things that you get to know about. And if you teach with Canvas, which all of us do in the California Community College system, go to your grades area in Canvas and turn on the Canvas gradebook. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Go into the Canvas gradebook and turn on the notes column. Click on the settings and turn on notes. It's a field that only you see. So you take notes about your students, and it's right there in the grades area. So you can reference those notes as you're scanning and checking in on them and seeing who is not turning in work on time. Those are ways to know who you should check in with, and then leverage what you learned about them in your communication. Adapt your teaching to meet the needs of your students. Reach out directly before it's too late. And also when you send them a message, if you send them a written message, think about your subject line. How can you humanize that subject line? Instead of saying missing assignments, perhaps you could say, Carlos, is everything okay on your side? It's going to resonate differently with your students. And those are also students that you can employ the voice and video feedback in the grade book. A self-affirming icebreaker is a great way to start the term. Again, I'm hoping that each of you will find one practice that you'll be able to apply. I know a lot of this is overwhelming, especially in the very stressful state that we are all working in. But what if you could find some way to demonstrate, to have students share something they're proud of, something that they feel good about. This is a beautiful way to recognize the differences in your course and to celebrate difference as an asset. So what I do in my course is share a photograph of someone or something that is important to you and share why. I use a tool called VoiceThread for that. Another tool that's very easy to add images to is Padlet. And a self-affirming icebreaker by Fabiola Torres is this one here that, oops, I'm going to play this quick video from Fabi.
Back in 1990, when I was in high school, I loved to dance. Today, I still dance by myself in my house.
So what do you still love to do? And invite students to share that. That's a beautiful prompt. I want to acknowledge a couple comments that I'm seeing in the chat. There's an interest in downloading the chat. You should be able to download the chat, I do believe, and if someone can confirm that who's in a participant view, you should be able to click on the 3 dots in the upper right corner of that box at the bottom of chat and be able to download. Okay, great. Yes, we can save the chat. So save it now if you want to reference it later. It's a simple way that you can meet your own needs. Thank you. I'm sorry if I'm going too fast. The Wisdom Wall assignment is an opportunity to foster metacognition, students' awareness of their learning, growth mindset, and self-efficacy. It's a simple concept and you can use it in lots of different ways in your course. The way I use it is in the last week of my course, I asked my students to reflect back on the beginning of the course. And I asked them to think about what they know now that they wish they had known then. And I tell them, I ask them to record it. I use VoiceThread. Again, you could do this in lots of different tools. You could do it in a VoiceThread, a discussion. You could do it in a Google Doc. You could do it in a Padlet, which I'll show in a second. But the concept is that you have them share that. So they're stepping into the role of an expert. They're talking about things that they know, and they're sharing feedback to their peers. And you let them know that whatever you share, you're going to share with your incoming students the next time. This is actually a link to the voice thread. If you want to click on it from my slides, you can open it and view it on your own later. You could use this for exams or major projects so that students can learn from each other, so that they can see students who remind them of themselves, so they can hear students who are going through the similar struggles that they're going through at the time and pick up effective strategies. Those student voices resonate very differently with students than instructor voices do. And this is by the wonderful Laura Gibbs from the University of Oklahoma. She calls hers an advice wall, and it functions much the same way. And this is what Padlet looks like, P-A-D-L-E-T. Padlet is a free tool, but it only allows you to create 3 Padlets for free. So keep that in mind if it's something you choose to look into or not. Be a warm demander. It's really important to not just look at a list of, you know, oh, I'm going to put a video in there and I'm going to do this icebreaker and I'm done. Those are things that will foster trust, that will foster relationships. But that warm demander, the pedagogy that you use to interrogate your teaching as the class moves forward, is really important. Components of warm demanders are including personal warmth as opposed to professional distance, active demanding as opposed to passive understanding, and affirms effort and ability, using terms like, I know you can do this. Look at what you just did. You're so smart. I believe in you. Recognizing, valuing, and supporting the effective dimensions of learning are not soft skills. This is hard and courageous work. They are components of anti-racist pedagogy. They create belonging for everybody. They ensure learning is anchored in psychological safety and positive relationships, and set the stage for transformative liberatory pedagogy, which you'll learn more about tomorrow from Fabiola Torres. So humanized online teaching, cultivate trust and connection through human presence, be a partner in your students' learning, get to know your students and identify your high opportunity learners, make your students' experience part of the learning environment and make their learning progress visible, and be a warm demander. Again, as I said at the start, I hope I said at the start, it is my hope that you've taken one thing away from this. And if you're in that panic mode, that trauma mode, take a deep breath. And I would really like to hear from some of you about questions. And also remind you that at 2:30 today, we are going to have our next session, taking off our emotional armor. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and where's my share screen button? Maybe I'm not going to stop sharing. Stacy, can you stop me, like try to share and stop me from sharing? I seem to have lost my Zoom bar, got lost, I think, in the space between my monitors.
It's only on your screen, Michelle. I don't think Stacy.
Yeah, I don't think I have it.
If Stacy, if you try to share your screen, doesn't it let you take over since you're the host?
Yes.
Michelle, while she's doing that, someone asked if
Does that work?
If they can have permission to share your slides with other faculty that weren't on the call.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. My slides are shared. Thank you so much, Stacey. That's better. My slides are shared with a Creative Commons license, so you're welcome to reshare them without my permission. That's not a problem at all. And in any reuse of any of the slides, if you could please just be sure to attribute me. That's all I ask for. So other ideas, practices, I know there are so many people on this call that have lots of ideas to contribute. If you'd like to click on participants and raise your hand, so click on participants in the bottom toolbar and then choose the raise hand feature.
Victoria has her hand up.
Oh,
Victoria.
there are already hands up. And Victoria, would you like to unmute yourself? I think you should be able to do that and ask your question. If you can't, I can unmute.
Oh, I didn't know. I'm sorry.
Hi,
I
Victoria.
just thought you wanted me to raise my hand.
Oh, okay, you don't have a
Question.
question. You passed the quiz.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Let's see, is it Lena?
Hi, I'm Michelle.
Hi.
Well, look at this situation right now. You have 200 posts. I'm very worried about that. Meaning, if I get all my students motivated like you have motivated us, how in the world am I going to answer to 200 posts?
So what you need to know, what you need to be asking yourself is, are those posts that you have to respond to, right? So if you have if you have to respond to everything, maybe it doesn't need to go in a discussion. I think that making the shift to online, that is a really important point. And it's not, I often hear from faculty that they fear they're opening the floodgates. That's not what this is about. It's about getting the students to lean in and share who don't share. So it's far more common for students to not contribute in online courses or to not share their concerns. So I have never had that experience with, you know, all of a sudden all of these students are coming to me, and it's not like that. That has not been my experience. I have students who try very hard because they know that I expect that of them, and they try very hard. And when they can't do it, they come to me and I'm there for them. So I think that it's important to try this and see how it goes, and to not be afraid of that. That's the best I can say. And if someone else wants to respond to that, I definitely would encourage another reply.
Ed is
And
next.
yeah, could I just note that Kara has said something great that you can do with discussion board posts. So if you're using a discussion for your discussions, I mean, that's like as an assessment, as a formative assessment or some kind of assessment, a great thing to do is to do a summary of what was said in the discussion and share that in an announcement with the course. Thank you for sharing that. And Helen, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was just saying Ed is the next one with his hand up.
Hi, Ed.
Whoops, I pushed the wrong button. I'm sorry. No, my hand is down.
No problemo. No.
Let me just say, this has been a tremendous presentation that you've made. It's really made a difference in my thinking. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Even though I cold called upon you there, and thank you for your contribution.
My apologies.
And I'm going to ask Richard to unmute. Richard Hankins.
Oh, hi, everybody. How you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I was really impressed by the presentation too. I read about that Stanford study myself a few years ago, and you know, clearly we have to be tolerant. We have to be supportive of all of our students, and that came through from your presentation extremely well. And I appreciate you for your presentation.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much. I appreciate that comment. And we have time for maybe one more. Solange.
Hi, Michelle, thank you so much for this presentation. I am teaching a course this fall, somebody else's course that was taught a year ago. I received the Canvas shell, and I'm going through every week of all the assignments, and there is 0 human contact. The whole thing is 100% online, and I don't even know where to begin to even integrate this human experience.
Okay. So it's hard for me to respond to that mindfully in a short response. But I would say start with the practices that you're learning here with the Humanizing Challenge. Start by developing a brief welcome video and a liquid syllabus, because not only does that start your course off with the cues of trust and belonging, you're going to develop the skill to create those brief videos. And those brief videos can be brought into your course to really bring your presence into your teaching throughout the course. You could record a video once a week as a check-in. You could record I'm talking like the videos I showed you, super brief. If you have a webcam or a smartphone and a YouTube channel, that's all you need. And the YouTube videos do not need to be public. I want to make that very clear. You can list them as, you can share them as unlisted. Those skills are skills that you can bring into your course in a variety of different ways. So I would encourage you to think about that. The rest of the course design, there's some great course design rubrics out there, like the CVC-OEI course design rubric, that you can use as a guide as you teach the course and reflect on some of those standards of course design and make improvements in the course based upon that. So it's a lot of work, but it is important to make it your own so that you yourself can feel engaged with the course.
Thank you.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Michelle, can you remind people where the video recording will be posted?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So on the website for the Humanizing Challenge for today, I'm going to put the link in the chat right now. This is the challenge page for today. When this archive is available, I'm going to put it right there. So you don't have to go looking for it. It will also be on the @ONE or Online Network of Educators YouTube channel. Okay. Thank you for being here. Thank you for starting this challenge with us all. And we have our next session coming up at 2:30. So I'm going to jump off Zoom now and take some deep breaths and get some air and be ready and mindfully present for that next session at 2:30. I hope you can join us. If not, we understand.
Get back on. Michelle, how do we get back on it?